Jim Shooter sells all his rights to Venom to Marvel Comics for just $10,000. This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comics. $10,000 for Venom? Well, it's not like he completely created Venom on his own, but he was a big part of getting Venom into the Marvel Comics universe, and I'm going to get into the story. Before I do, make sure to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications. So Jim Shooter, editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics, also wrote a series called Secret Wars. Secret Wars, most people have heard of by now. It was a 12-issue series that was really the first major comics crossover. That was done in, well, first came out in 1984. What a cool series. It was really interesting. I did buy it off the stands myself. I was a kid at the time. So this article comes from Bleeding Cool, and it talks about the whole story. Jim Shooter was at a convention called GalaxyCon, and he was asked about Marvel's plans for Secret Wars that he wrote when he was editor-in-chief of Marvel, and supposedly set the tone for all Marvel Comics events that followed. Now, part of that was Jim was trying to kind of make all the editorial and content uniform. Continuity was a really big deal. So if you were kind of mixing up what was going on in one book and another book, and the characters are all interrelated, one of the things Marvel was really stressing and trying to do, that actually Shooter did a great job of, was keep track of all that was going on, so that readers who were following multiple Marvel comics had the experience of, okay, this story is happening in the Marvel world and it relates to this character there. And the continuity was a big deal. It really was. It is a great extra thing to get when you're buying these comics, so that it wasn't just the story of just one series. It's really, really pretty wild stuff. It's not really been repeated very well ever since Jim Shooter stopped doing comics. Now, Jim... Okay, so when Jim wrote this series, the reason he wrote it, at least, he said, is because he really couldn't assign it to anyone else, because there was always like a lot of infighting, and he probably wanted to have control of everything. He did a great job on it. It's a great book. You can buy a collection of Jim's Secret Wars. But it was also the first appearance of Spider-Man's black costume. So Spider-Man's black costume, this came out Secret Wars number 8. It looked like this. Costume changes were a big deal back in the 1980s. Like, it didn't happen often. This was the first time you saw a different Spider-Man costume that you would ever notice the difference. It wasn't just the way the artist drew it. It was a different costume. And that idea actually came into Marvel from a fan. This is coming from Screen Crush, and was a guy named... Now, Venom, as we know Venom, was developed by David McElhaney and Todd McFarlane. Like the look, the feel, the story, his whole aesthetic of the character. It was not created. That was not created by Jim Shooter. That was not written by Jim Shooter. But before those guys got to the black costume, before McFarlane and McElhaney got to the costume, it was just basically this living molecules of a costume that Peter Parker had as Spider-Man after Secret Wars. Now, the original idea for it came from a comics fan, a Marvel Comics fan named Randy Schueller. Marvel ran a contest for an aspiring talent, and he submitted his idea for a story involving Spider-Man getting a new costume. And in 2007, in Comic Book Resources, Schueller explained it this way: I thought it would be cool if Spidey needed to upgrade his powers and his look, so I came up with this idea that Reed Richards from Fantastic Four made a new costume for Spidey using the same unstable molecules that the Fantastic Four's costumes are made of. The unstable molecules would flow into Peter's pores and allow him to cling to walls better. And the original idea was for him to be able to stick better to walls by 25%. So Shooter liked the idea and was trying to encourage Randy Schueller to actually write this story for a Marvel comic in a Spider-Man book. It didn't all come together. Shooter's first professional work was as a 13-year-old kid writing DC comics. So it's great to see he was encouraging people like that back then. So the long story short was Schueller didn't write it, but it wound up being premiered in Secret Wars, and then you see in Spider-Man 252 becomes his official costume. So that was the background of how it was created. But this is Shooter's story about how he wound up selling his claim on the Venom character and Secret Wars for, this says, this is $10,000 in UK writing. Okay, so for $10,000. Shooter said it this way. This one clown called me from Marvel. He wasn't an editor or anything. He was some executive in property management, which is a little odd. He asked me if I wanted to write a novelization of Secret Wars. So that would be a prose version of Secret Wars, which would have been great. I would have been happy to buy that. Jim Shooter's prose version of Secret Wars would have been great because he wrote the original comics. He's a good writer. And he said he'd consider it. So Jim gets an offer, and the offer came with a contract, and the contract was like this thick. So he's showing it was a very thick contract. And almost all of it was a retroactive work for hire, and it covered every possible conceivable way. If the court didn't support that, your children have to go to jail. Now, he's exaggerating about his children going to jail. But Jim did not like the switcheroo aspect of this, where basically they made him a really lowball offer to write a prose novelization of Secret Wars. But obviously they made this offer to him for the purpose of capturing any extra rights that Shooter may have had to Secret Wars as a story to be adapted into movies or anything else, as well as the creation of the character Beyonder that he created. He created a couple of characters in Secret Wars, as well as the black costumed Spider-Man. So Shooter turned him down, and then he got a call from the guy's boss, David Bogart, and he's an executive vice president who has something to do with the properties. And Bogart apologized for the lower down guy who was trying to con him into signing over prior rights. He said he can't really talk about it, Bogart. So basically, Bogart was explaining, look, we want you to sign a work for hire. Now, when Jim was editor-in-chief, he did this writing assignment. And it's my understanding that Shooter does still receive royalties for Secret Wars when it's collected and printed as a book. But Shooter said, hey, it's work for hire, so I'm not going to, you don't have to pay me to sign away rights for something that he didn't feel entitled to. Which sounds honorable if that's the deal that they made. But at the same point, he left very unceremoniously, got kicked out of Marvel Comics as editor-in-chief. That's a whole other story. He went through a lot of hassle. A lot of people do know who he is. A lot of people don't know who he is. But he really did do a lot for comics and for comics creators. He created Epic Comics, which was the first creator-owned imprint where you could publish your own comics as a comic creator. It was really like a thank you to comic creators for Marvel. And creators were able to keep their own rights to their own characters. That was years before Image. He got people health benefits. He got them incentive bonus payments on the sale of books. So that said, it was great of him to be willing to sign it away. Basically, he was willing to sign away the rights to Venom and Secret Wars royalties for nothing. And Bogart got him to take the $10,000. He said, take the money, dummy. And Jim said, all right, I'll take it. It also is just generally speaking, if you're going to sign a contract and sign away rights, there has to be an exchange of value or it's not considered a legitimate contract. So $10,000 for Venom, is that worth it? Is it a fair amount? To me, it's whatever they want to negotiate. I definitely think Shooter could have negotiated more because Venom has turned into a pretty large property, and Shooter featuring of the black costume in Secret Wars. Secret Wars had every major comics hero in it from Marvel. Everybody was buying Secret Wars. All of us comic fans were talking about Secret Wars. And to launch the black costume for Spider-Man in Secret Wars really was a great promotional idea. Again, costumes weren't changing constantly. That was really the first new Marvel Comics major costume event, and certainly the first crossover event. So as Shooter's happy, he got his money. If it was me, I would have wanted more money. Now, speaking of which, if you want to support my work, you can check out The Mermaids. This is my graphic novel. It's about a teacher who joins a team of rebels determined to overthrow and kill a powerful mermaid queen. She's a mermaid. The book is done. It's in print. We've already started shipping it, and I'm getting really great feedback, and thank you everybody who have already supported this. And you can also check out my other book, College of the Dead Graduation Day, where college costs you an arm and a leg. I love saying it that way. This is an ongoing zombie apocalypse series, and it's exactly what you would think it would be. It's a zombie apocalypse that takes place on a college campus, and then we follow these characters as they fight and they try to survive. You can check that out at collegeofthedead.com. Link is also in the description. Subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, and I will see you again soon with another video, and if I don't see you, I will miss you.